Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. I'm back with another episode of Race Week Review, talking about all things sports cars, and in this case, unfortunately, about all things bad about Oulton Park, as that was the circuit of choice for this week's sports car action. So let's not waste any more time. As is tradition in the channel, if you're new, we begin with the slower classes of the weekend in the Ginetta Juniors. The Ginetta Juniors are one of my absolutely favorite classes to watch, just period. It combines all things good about sports car racing, so the door banging, the draft heavy racing action, well, not all things good about sports car, all things good about low powered sports car racing, there you go, I corrected myself. And you know, just action packed racing. And it takes it and combines it with karting or single-seater racing by taking, you know, young up-and-coming talents that could actually go on and achieve great things, not just in sports cars, but, you know, anywhere really. These guys, well, last year's champion Freddie Slater is my hot tip for 15-year-olds that might end up in F1 pretty soon. So there you go. This is a breeding ground for talent. Hence why I'm even more sad that they began on a track which unfortunately just does not really promote racing. These cars are about as racy as they come, just, yeah, no doubt about it really. Go on and name like 5 cars better for actually wheel-to-wheel racing down in the chat. I'd be very surprised if you can come up with any that are actually raced by good drivers regularly as well. So yeah, if these cars can't overtake on Oulton Park, basically is my point, then which cars can? Now, not to say that they can't do it at all. Obviously, in these ones, it's sort of fine, but we could already see that if you are a good driver doing a very, very good defensive race, nobody can really do anything against it, and we had no better way of proving this theory than Ethan Jeff Hall, karting graduate, and a guy I'm quite excited about after his karting endeavors, now finally stepping up to car racing, and he won his first race ever, winning on debut with a defensive masterclass. It has to be said, it was a very, very good drive. He was clearly struggling for pace. But yeah, there was just no way past for Charlie Hart, his main competitor, sitting on his bumper most of the race. There was a few other guys trying to get past at different stages of the race, but yeah, there was just nowhere for them to go. And yeah, this basically shows all the problems with Oulton Park, doesn't it? Like normally in these cars, see, even Freddie Slater couldn't just lead every lap. You do have to concede the lap every now and then it's about being in the lead at the right time. At the end, it's a bit like MX-5 racing, if you're more familiar with this. So yeah, just disappointing from a spectator position, but obviously fantastic drive by Jeff Hall. This is no critique to the drivers, obviously wouldn't make any sense. Now, let's talk about some of the returning core of drivers in the series to get a better understanding of who's actually who and who's good and who isn't. Aside from all the exciting rookies, the 2 main contenders for the title, I'd say, are Chase Fernandez and Charlie Hart. Charlie Hart got 3 second places, so at least he has the consistency figured out, let's put it this way. Chase Fernandez struggling a little more than I would have maybe liked, but then again, he's probably in a worse car as well, so it's all well and good. Either way, these 2 will be consistently at the sharp end. For the most part, they were last year already, so yeah, I don't expect that stopping anytime soon. And then there's also Henry Jocelyn, who clearly could be with them in terms of pace, but is just a little clumsy, for lack of a better word. He really struggled to string together an entire race out at the front. But I'm sure maybe he'll figure this out eventually and keep the car where it belongs, because yeah, the pace is there with him, and that's nice to see. Nonetheless, the key focus of this series, as I said, is the young rookies. It's the fact that you can get into these cars from age 14, so younger than you could in F4, which makes it such an attractive thing for, you know, British or people based in Britain, up-and-coming Formula drivers, for example, you know. And yeah, a lot of them I already had on my list before, you know, Archie Clark, Thomas Ingram Hill, Marcus Sater, and obviously Ethan Jeff Hall. These 4 I was sort of looking out for anyway. All of them very, very good in karting, very accomplished racers. The name that really stood out for me though was Isaac Phelps, who I didn't really know before. I had to check my notes to make sure I've actually watched him race before. I have, because he was also in the British karting scene, as you'd sort of expect, but he was very anonymous, at least last year, which is when I started following the national karting scenes. So fair enough, maybe he was much better the years before. I had a bit of a checkup and I couldn't really find any, like his CV doesn't scream impressive, but let me tell you, these drives certainly did. In the wet races, both 2 and 3, he won both of them pretty convincingly, about as convincingly as you can do in these Ginettas. So very impressive drives, and I'm now really keen to sort of find out, is this because he's really good at Oulton Park? Is this because he's really good in the wet? Is there a combination of both? Maybe he's just, you know, tested a bunch of wet Oulton Park over the winter or something, and that's why he's now super proficient at it. Or is he actually going to be a championship contender? Because obviously by winning 2 out of the 3 first races, yeah, guess what? You will be in this conversation immediately. And I am very much looking forward to see where this actually plays out. But either way, yeah, please, if anyone here follows the British karting scene and knows more about Isaac Phelps, and you know, if he's always been this good, but maybe he was just, I don't know, in a bad team or something. Is there a reason for this sudden increase in form? Or maybe he is just a very good Ginetta driver. Anyway, let's move on to British GT, the grand show of the weekend. British GT's GT4 class actually managed to produce half-decent racing despite the track difficulties and the very tricky conditions in both of the races. But I do want to make it very clear, do not get fooled by the championship standings. The number 7, Forsetti Aston Martin, was definitely, and no doubt about it, the class of the field. Jamie Day, probably the best GT4 driver this weekend. At least it's really hard to make an argument otherwise, in my opinion. And then Mikey Porter, Ginetta Junior graduate from last year, by the way, in case you want a reason to actually watch the series, and if you're not into Formula stuff. He is also improving day by day. They did the GT4 Winter Series together, and he was already there. He was improving race weekend after race weekend, and I don't even know, I think they won the title. It wasn't the most interesting series ever, but they were always fighting at the front at the very least, so the potential was already very clear to see. But the great thing is that he has actually fully clicked now with the car, it feels like. In the first race, they handed over the car in the lead to Porter, and he just defended it all the way to the checkered flag, so he about did all you can do, really. Yes, he didn't have the pace to run away from the field, but you don't have to, do you, if you win it anyway? So there we go, win on debut in the British GT, not bad. And more importantly even, he had some sort of sick charge, and I really have to go and find a replay of that somewhere, where seemingly within a couple laps he went from like P4, 5-ish to the lead in the second race. Wet conditions, I might add again, so very impressive drive. And then unfortunately I'm not a fan of the pit stop rules in some of the GT series, right? The enforced pit stop time penalty for previous winners. I don't like it. I think it's just artificial nonsense, but that's just me. So essentially they got punished heavily by winning the previous race. They had to take a longer pit stop, as is the rule. And with this longer pit stop, they did drop back down to P3. And then the race turned into absolute carnage all around and just never really turned yellow anymore. So they didn't get any time to make up the positions that they only lost due to the rule book. So, you know, just goes to show one of the many flaws I find with this particular system of trying to artificially balance the different teams. I think if you're the best team, you might as well go on and win all the races. Yeah, why not? I think that's fine. That's why I like sports. Nonetheless, this is the car to watch out for. The car which then ended up inheriting the actual win in the second race was the Team Parker Racing number 31 with Charles Dawson and Seb Morris, and they are also a very, very competent duo, obviously, by all accords. In general, the front runners were very settled, I want to say. So together with these two cars, there was also the Forsetti number 47 and the Optima McLaren number 90. And these 4 were really the top 4 in both of these races. In the first race in particular, there was a really bizarre scene, and I think the commentators never really picked up on it. So I don't quite know what happened. Must have been down due to the on-track positioning to the leaders, and when the safety car came out, you know, the usual thing. But like essentially during one of the safety cars, all but 4 GT4s, all but the lead 4 GT4s lost the lead lap, and this then meant that the number 47, despite getting a massive 1-minute penalty for running too short a pit stop, managed to take home P4 anyway because they were still on the lead lap despite the 1 minute penalty while everyone else wasn't. So really weird scene, but either way, that's besides the point anyway. Even when they all remained on the lead lap, it was really those 4 cars fighting for it. Obviously, you'd expect the Academy Fords to get back in there eventually, but that's sort of the power dynamic at the moment in GT4. Now, GT3, obviously the big show, the real stars of the show in British GT by all accounts. And this was where the problems with the track were really clear as day. Even on a wet track, it was actually borderline impossible to do any racing. There was a handful of proper on-track moves with nobody sort of half spinning out of the way beforehand or anything, you know, with no massive mistake caused by the wet conditions beforehand. So just a really sad state of affairs. And obviously it's always been like this with Oulton Park, don't get me wrong. I'm not like, and why has it turned shit this year? No, it's always been shit. I am well aware, but this is the time to call for change, really. I don't think the track is suitable for GT3 competition, much as with GB3 competition, as I discussed in the single-seater episode of Race Week Review. You might want to check it out, linked up here. Either way, we can still talk about the results, but with all of this, we have to keep in mind that the racing was very limited. It's hard to tell the true race pace of a lot of the cars because of that. And obviously it's only one track, so we can't read too much into things anyway. All of this said, the Barwell Motorsports Lamborghinis absolutely were the team to beat this time around. They are the only Lambos, so is it BOP, you know, a very favorable BOP or just an excellent setup? We'll never know. Either way, perfectly executed races, so there's nothing you can blame the team for, really. They shared the wins. The Collard duo in the number 63 picked up the first win, and then Sandy Mitchell with his new teammate Alex Martin picked up the second win in the number 78, which came so close to winning the title last year and then didn't. So certainly one we'll keep an eye on anyway. Sandy Mitchell is one of those stars in the series, in case you aren't familiar, so a reason to follow the car. Unfortunately, their main rivals weren't really there. It's a weird-looking British GT after watching last year with the 2Cs number 6, Loggie, and now Phil Keane instead of Jules Gounon, which hurts my soul. I love Gounon and he's incredibly entertaining. He can pull off passes around Oulton Park like it's a normal track, so there's a reason to like the guy. Nonetheless, at least they are still there. They are still competing for the title. Even worse, though, to me, is that 2 other heavy hitters with Dan Harper and Raffaele Marciello, who literally got a new car bought for him because obviously he switched to BMW. So naturally his driver Ferguson decided he would now also buy a BMW to keep racing with Marciello. But none of these 2 cars were able to ever hit the front at all. Neither the reigning champions, the Century BMW, was nowhere to be found as well. So just a very upside down table throughout the race weekend. Who was on the top on the other side though was the McLarens. Yeah, McLaren looked really good as a package all around and will definitely probably be fighting for more wins than they were last year with the new upgraded Evo car or whatever. It's a situation we'll monitor, but yeah, I really do hope the old championship, sort of the big boys in the championship, make their comeback sooner rather than later and actually give us even more excitement. But then again, we are heading to a track that's actually raceable, so I'm not particularly worried about it. Last but not least, and we always have to finish on a feel-good story, don't we? It's Adam Smalley stepping up to GT3. As far as I could figure out, it was his GT3 debut. He might have had one-off races somewhere, but at the very least, this is his first GT3 proper campaign for Garage 59 in the McLaren. And it's been great. He is the reigning British Porsche Carrera Cup champion, so obviously, Carrera Cup champions do tend to be quality drivers if they come from the competitive series, and I'm glad that he has adapted to GT3 very seamlessly, immediately fighting around like P4, P5, wherever he got handed the car. He could keep it no problem, so there definitely wasn't any noticeable drop in pace or whatever when he got in the car. Very solid debut. This does throw up the question though, where is the opportunity for Harry King? Why does nobody like Harry King? He's such a phenomenal driver. This is, again, where maybe you guys can hop into the comments and tell me something about it if you know more about this case. Is there some behind-the-scenes reason for why he's not ever considered for any GT3 rides? Or is it literally just the guy has zero funding? Because he's won so many things by now, you'd figure someone must be willing to pay, you know, Porsche should be willing to, you know, look into a factory deal or something. But either way, this is very off topic, to be fair. He wasn't even racing this weekend, was he? Anyway, we are finally heading towards much more sports car racing now that the European core of the season is finally gonna begin. This was only a little taster, really. Next week we'll have GT World Challenge Europe, GT World Challenge America, and all of this comes with GT4 as well, which I do love. So if you want to watch more about GT3 racing, GT4 racing, young drivers coming up through the ranks of sports cars or single seaters, you might want to consider subscribing to the channel. And otherwise, I'll thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.